Hi, Laura. How are you?
Hi, Maddie. I'm good. How are you today?
I'm good. And hi to everybody on Facebook. We're live, right?
We are live, yes.
We are live.
And thank you for
Okay.
joining us. And I guess we have a little explaining to do about why
Oh my
I'm here
gosh.
and why you're here.
Yes, I guess we do. Oh my gosh. What's your version of this story?
Well, my people, Mike, are busy programming things, and I need him to keep writing software. So I'm stepping in and I'm going to talk with you today about the voice.
Yay, I'm so excited. Matt invited me a couple days ago to come and talk with you all, and I'm excited to be back. I always love when I get to chat with voicelessons.com. So
Good.
it's going to be a fun, different kind of evening for us. Well, evening my time, afternoon your time, right?
Yep.
Yep.
I'm in Oregon and you're in.
I'm in DC, in
Yep.
Washington, DC. Yep. So crazy.
Cool.
Such a crazy time. Yay. Well, I kind of want to know a little bit more about you and your background and stuff like that, and how you got started with voicelessons.com and how you
Oh,
landed where
sure.
you are.
Sure, thanks for asking. Well, I got started with voicelessons.com for the same reason many people did, which was March 2020. What am I going to do with myself now that I'm not allowed to teach in person?
Yes.
So I looked up on the internet, what the heck does one do for teaching online, and found this company. And here I am still to this day helping the dream come true.
That's so good. What do
It
you
is
do?
good. Well, I do a lot of designing of the software with Mike and helping customers learn to use it. And also, the favorite thing I have right now is giving demos to prospective students. So we advertise on the internet, and some of you listening might have seen those, and that's why you're here. And you maybe are curious about taking a voice lesson, but what is that? How does a voice lesson even work? And how does it work online? I don't know if I want to buy into this. So what we did is we came up with this demonstration meeting that people can sign up for. It's free. It takes 15 minutes, and I meet with people all over the world. Literally, France,
Literally? Oh,
Kazakhstan, all over America, Canada, Asia, and
amazing.
we chat, and I hear them tell me why they're interested in learning to sing, which is super fun. Um, and then I show them how our software works. And then at the end, I say, well, would you like to meet some teachers? Because I have teachers who are looking for new students. And they say yes or no. And then I connect them and they get to know those teachers and they choose one and hopefully take some lessons.
That's so good. It's a nice, like, little introductory packet or experience for people who might be a little nervous getting involved, it sounds like, right?
Exactly. It can be daunting from both ends. I think a lot of teachers are used to their highest tech device being their grand piano.
Yes.
you know, and
Yeah.
so they come in here and they think, oh my gosh, what am I getting into? And I try and help them with that. But then students also, they feel maybe a little nervous about singing for some perfect stranger.
Yes.
Um, I have to add though, there's also this nice thing that happens when you're online like this. You feel maybe removed from those nerves because you're not in the same room with a stranger. It's a distance.
Yeah, I've noticed the same thing for sure. Like anyone who might be anxious, it's as simple as like I can just shut my computer and walk away if I'm really uncomfortable with this
Right,
and everybody's fine, as opposed
right.
to I'm in someone's house or whatever that is. That feels
Yeah,
a little
yeah, yeah.
extra nerve-wracking, I
That's
think.
harder to
So
extricate oneself.
it
But
is.
luckily, most everybody who teaches voice is super friendly and enjoys helping people into this lovely world of creating energy and sound from our
Yes.
bodies.
Yes, it's so, so good. Oh, I love it. I'm glad to finally be able to know a little bit more about what you do with voicelessons.com. That's so fun.
Thanks. And how about
Yeah.
you? What's your deal and background?
Oh my gosh. Like my background,
Well,
the whole
sure, yeah.
shebang.
So, yeah, tell us about what kind of a singer you are, and I'll do the same after.
Yeah, yeah. So, I am 31 years old. I am a musical theater performer and teacher predominantly. I grew up in Utah and I was raised in a really musical household. My mom is also a voice teacher, a wonderful voice teacher, and she taught children's choirs while me and my siblings were younger. And there were always voice lessons going on in the house. And so I feel like a lot of it was very osmosis and just joined my life. I knew from a young age that this was definitely what I wanted to do. So I decided as I graduated high school and what to do with my life, I went and got a degree in musical theater from Weber State University and loved my time there. But still felt like when I was done with the program that I still had so much more to learn. You know how education works. You go in, you learn that you have a lot more to learn, I
Yeah,
think is
exactly.
a lot of what happens. So, but during that time, my mom had found the CCM Institute with Shenandoah University, and she'd gone back and done some courses. And after I graduated, she said, Maddie, you have to come with me. You have to come with me. And I said, okay, let's do this. I knew I wanted to get into teaching, and so this was a really good way to dive into it. And I took the full 10-day course, and it changed my life. And I started a little bit of teaching, and also decided at the same time that I wanted to go another route, and I went and got my MFA in acting as opposed to voice specifically.
Wow, how
I
fun.
know it's such a different background than I feel like I traditionally hear, but I'm very proud of it. I love being able to speak to performers from the actor side, from the industry side, and now after I finished my MFA in acting at the University of Central Florida, I came up to Washington D.C. and decided I'm going to go get that full master's in music from Shenandoah University in commercial contemporary voice. And it has been one of the most rewarding experiences and life-changing experiences I've ever had to go from uh, using a lot of imagery work for voice training to understanding what it all means at a scientific, anatomical, functional level, and then
Yeah.
helping singers to do the same. Oh, nothing warms my heart more than being able to really unpack all of that. So here I am. I teach for Shenandoah University's musical theater program now, and I know that's how I met Matt and how I get to come on here and talk to voicelessons.com every once in a while and play around with the social media with you guys a little bit too, which is so fun.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. We appreciate that so
Oh,
much.
I think you're muted, Laura.
Uh-oh. How did I get
Maybe. It
muted?
might be me.
Am I, can you hear me
Keep
now?
talking.
Hello, hello. My audio seems to be on.
If we have audience out there that can tell us whether or not they can hear
Yeah,
Laura,
that would be nice.
it might just be me.
Is anyone listening? Let's look. Okay, well, Kate, if you're there, can you hear us? Kate
Check
has,
my audio settings here and see if anything's done something funky.
in the meantime, Kate has a fabulous question to ask. Yes, I'm ticklish, Kate. So while Maddie's figuring that out, I think I'll go ahead.
I'm still struggling to hear you. I mean,
Okay.
not struggling. I still can't.
Let's see.
We knew this was bound to happen. We knew.
Yeah, two singers, not computer people. So let's see. Okay, well, today we're going to do some chatting after we get connected again about imagery that teachers use in voice lessons so that we can try and unpack what is it the teachers mean when they say certain words. And hopefully somebody's going to help us understand if we're being heard. Maddie, can you hear me now? Hello. Some of you, if you've taken any voice lessons, will have heard concepts like forward and warm and deep and smoky and head voice and maybe even pairs and brass and mix and twang. And we're trying to have some fun today talking about what that might mean from different teachers.
I didn't hear Maddie yet,
Okay.
but I had the phone turned on.
Hey, you can hear me now, Mike? On the TV? I can't hear you now, Maddie.
Two, three, test 1, 2, 3. Anything?
Now I can hear
Okay,
you.
you can hear me. I still cannot hear you. Yeah, we can try rejoining. I'm not sure exactly how to leave. I'm gonna leave. I see the leave button.
Okay. So I'm being told that you can hear both of us, but Maddie couldn't hear me.
I hear you.
Now
I
you
hear
hear me?
you. Yes.
Oh, good.
That was quite the 5-minute adventure of our lives. Did you tell your story while I sat here in panic?
Deep breath.
Deep breath. We love it. Did you get to tell your story?
No, I was waiting on you. So yeah, my story is different than yours, but similar in its variability. I first went to school. I grew up playing instruments, piano and oboe and singing, and then I thought, yes, I want to become a singer. But then I chickened out and went and got a philosophy degree. And as one of my colleagues once said to me, I did that because I was afraid that I wouldn't make it as an artist, And she goes, "Oh yeah, well, it's really likely you're going to make it as a philosopher. So what were you thinking?"
So true. What does a life in philosophy even look like? Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
so
you have
crazy.
to be a professor, I think. Anyway, so yeah, then I couldn't avoid it. I went back to school and got my master's degree in vocal performance from San Francisco Conservatory. And then started on about an 8 or 9 year career track to be an opera singer. And that had great successes, but it is wearing and tiring, and decided to back out a little and raise a family. And that was all in California. And then I moved to Oregon to raise my kids, and was was happy to find that I moved to a city that has a great art scene, so I could get a lot of gigs once I moved here, and did a bunch of opera and concerts, and taught at the University of Oregon for 9 years. So that was really fun.
That's amazing.
So my perspective on all these questions that we're going to talk about is going to be slightly different than yours, Maddie.
Yes, I'm so interested because they're very different backgrounds. But
yeah, they are.
Teachers
we do have Shenandoah, the Summer Institute in common. I had done that and ran into Matt there, and then ran into him again years later now here in this setup. So so let's dive in. I mean,
dive in.
We did our are things. So let me just go back to the chat because Kate posted a question asking who's ticklish.
Oh my gosh.
I'm ticklish.
Definitely.
Okay,
Sure.
good. Moving on. Thank you for your question, Kate. Okay, so we're going to show this first question. What do teachers mean by forward?
Yay, I love this. So imagery, there's so much coded language in our industry, so much imagery being used to describe certain sounds that are happening. And this happens because originally we didn't have eyes on the voice when we've been teaching singing formally for hundreds of years, and we didn't have eyes on the voice. And the science has come such a long way just within the last century that so much of the imagery work that was originally used to describe the sensations that some singers might have felt originally has carried over into the traditions of teaching today.
Yeah.
So you're going to hear lots of imagery throughout teaching. Even in function and evidence-based voice teachers, they're still going to use the image. I still use imagery. My goal is to know what the imagery means at a functional anatomical level underneath it all. My students, if my students find that varying levels of helpful, but it's my job definitely to see if I can figure that out. So forward, oh my gosh, what would we mean by forward? In my industry, I usually associate the word forward with a disengaged swallow reflex. So no tongue retraction, no constrictor muscles being super engaged. The larynx isn't particularly low. And that allows for that concept of like the swallowed sound to potentially be released forward, right? I also sometimes think more megaphone in shape in regards to the vowels a little bit. So as opposed to this inverted megaphone where things are really ooh and dark, you might get an ah with a little more release forward in that megaphone shape.
I'll just interrupt. I just want to interrupt and say one of the things I'm hearing you talk about is that idea of letting go of all those muscles that you listed. I would never talk about it that way from a classical perspective because I think my assumption is those are all supposed to be loose. And I'm teaching that from the start. Everything in here should just be passive, released, not pushing down, not pulling forward. Right. And so as you said that, I thought, well, why wouldn't I say that? I think it's because I would always have been saying that all along.
Yeah, absolutely. For
That's
sure.
Interesting.
It is so interesting. I think some teachers probably go, I don't know. I don't want to speak for other teachers necessarily by any means, but I think that's what we're getting at when we say, can we make it a little more forward, is a little bit more of that released concept throughout the vocal tract as well. You might be. I think you're onto something in that. I'm trying to think. The last thing was in regards to the vocal fold level. The vocal folds can have varying levels of pressure on them. They can be firmly closed together for sounds that are similar to like a fry or a grunt. So the fry is that quality for our listeners, or the grunty very firmly closed. You can also have really loose closure on the vocal folds for breathy sounds. So I think forward probably associates something in between. The vocal folds are in a state of what we call flow. They're not overly pressy or overly breathy, but a kind of clear quality of sound. There's breath flow, but it's not, we don't associate the immediate breathiness in the sound. Do you agree? Do you disagree? How do you feel?
I do. Yeah. No, I do. I think one can have forward qualities in the breathy and pressed tones too, though.
I think you're right. Absolutely.
So for me, it becomes a question of resonance and focusing resonance. So when we're classical singers, we're trained to try and make that sound as loud and carrying as possible, right?
Right.
And so I try and train people to find that ping as a little, maybe a place right in front of their face. It's different for everybody, but that develop an awareness of how the room vibrates and how it feels against your skin or in your bones. And then if you can associate that location as being in the front, then you can aim for that by even just having a thought. It's almost magic. It's like you just say, okay, I want this sound to be forward. And some little tiny set of muscles back here is going to say, well, that's fine. We can help you with that. If I go in there and say, okay, muscles, put the sound forward, I might not get the same success because I'm not speaking directly to those muscles.
Yeah.
They're not
absolutely.
listening to me. They are listening to my desire to hear a certain sound.
Yeah. I adore and admire the work of Dr. Shannon Coates. She is incredible. And one of the things that I have heard her say is you cannot, how did she word it? You cannot tell the muscles what to do. You can only give them something to do.
Yes,
And I
exactly.
love it so much. It's so good.
I use that one a lot, that concept for forward, because I don't want them to shove their tongue forward or lift it so that I want them to simply desire a certain sound, experiment, find it, note it, ask for it again. And it becomes this process of self-discovery rather than commands.
Yeah. I think that's what I love most about what you're saying is because every singer is different. We have this concept of placement that I constantly hear things about. And in reality, placement is an illusion. You can't place your voice anywhere, but it doesn't mean it's not a helpful tool for many
That's right.
singers. And I love hearing you say that it's a process of self-discovery as opposed to command, because I think that's where we get hung up is like when you say you must feel it in your cheekbones.
Right.
But what do you do with a student who everyone's physiology is so different and the structure of how their instruments are made up that how can we possibly expect two singers to feel the exact same thing while they're singing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah, I mean that was the problem of traditional teaching all along, right? If Madama felt it one way, you were meant to sing it just like me. I've done it. Now do it. You can't do it. Well, you must be a poor singer. Goodbye. Give me the next one. And it was just this luck of the draw. If my teacher in my town, if her body and voice functioned like mine, we could get along. If they didn't, I would have been feeling like I wasn't knowing what I was doing.
Yes. I'll have a number of students, I'll ask, where do you feel those vibrations localized? And some will just look at me like, I have no idea what you're talking about, lady. Yes, absolutely. And then I will have some, it feels like right here. And I go, okay, let's repeat that. Let's look at that. So it's always an interesting process to figure that out.
I love it when I kind of despise it when they say, what are you talking about? Or I don't know. To the answer of where do you feel it? And they say, I don't know. It's like, well, there isn't anyone else in the whole world that can know this for you. It is only you.
Yeah.
So we're going to play with the voice until you find that thing or something to say to you.
That concept of ownership over one's instrument, for sure. Yeah, I love it.
Cool.
So cool.
All right. Good. Let's go to the next one. What do teachers mean by warm?
If you think about qualities of warm things, I like to associate it to like even non-instrumental aspects. Warm things like a warm blanket or a warm jacket or something like that. I think there's some kind of quality that is porous, as in like expansive, kind of fuzzy, as opposed to like really, really condensed and really, really compressed and stuff like that. And if we take that, the porous, as in like there are pores and like fuzziness and all of those kinds of things, if we take that aspect and apply it to the voice, I still think the same aspect of like a little more expansive instead of condensed. So for me, this probably boils down to, again, a little bit of the airflow through the vocal folds. So instead of super duper compressed, we're going to have more of a flow quality. We might even have a breathy quality. I would also associate it with a little more length in the vocal tract. Would you say the same thing, Laura? Maybe a little more open spaces throughout the vocal tract,
Sure.
open pharynx,
Yes,
maybe
absolutely.
a lower larynx, maybe more forward lips, a little more depthiness to that sound, we would
Absolutely.
say. So, yeah, those would be my two combos. Longer, more open vocal tract and a little bit more flow on the
Good.
vocal
And
folds.
so for those who don't know, when we say vocal tract, we're talking from the top of the folds up through the mouth, the instrument that resonates
Yes.
from your body.
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, I think about warm as being enveloping and comforting.
Mm.
And so when I hear a voice that is warm, I am pulled to it and drawn to it, and I kind of want to wear it,
Mm.
be
Yes.
comforted by it.
Yeah, I love that. I think the sound qualities differ dramatically. I don't know if we have Bright coming up. We might have Bright. I
We
think
do.
this is
That'll look
usually,
great.
oh, we do. We'll save that for that. But the
Well,
difference being
yeah, I have brassy. Maybe we'll go there.
ooh, that'll be good. Yeah, I love that. So good. Okay, I love it.
All right, so let's do brassy. What does brassy mean?
I love this one. So, what's great, again, let's associate it to even things outside of the voice. Brassy, we usually associate with brass instruments, right? So, the qualities that are similar between a human voice and a brass instrument and how we can make them work together is that the vibration point, so like the vocal folds or where the lips meet the brass, is very firmly closed together, I would say. So
Right.
as opposed to that breathy quality, we've got some really firm closure on the part of the voice that vibrates. And then the shape. The shape of the instrument is always flared and open at the front and a little smaller and more narrow in the back to give us that megaphone shape to the sound. So instead of oh, we're going to get wah
Yeah.
qualities, right? How do you feel?
Yeah, I do like that. Yeah, I get it confused with twang, which is another one on our list.
That'll be
And I
good.
also am thinking of how does it relate to something like spinto, which
Ooh,
in
see, these are
Italian is
words that are less familiar for me. So,
so
yes.
spinto is pushed in Italian.
Mm,
And the ones who have the spinto voice are singing over the biggest orchestras in the
mm,
repertoire. So
wow.
Puccini and Verdi, and I mean, there's dramatic, but the spinto has a little bit more of a piercing quality to it. And it's often a voice that you wouldn't necessarily like to be up close and personal with. It's
Mm,
something that's more suited to a big room, or the use of it in that
yeah.
way is more suited to a big room because it has room to expand and become tempered by the acoustics of the room. If you were right next to it, you'd just, whoa,
Yeah, you
inside
bet.
voice.
Yes. Even just that word push is one that is always so interesting to me. You can take that concept and if you think about what your body engages in to push something very, very heavy, you en you engage in an increased intra-abdominal pressure with your
Yeah.
body. You take that big breath and you go to help you move the very large object, which is also similar, obviously not to the same extreme, but similar to the subglottal pressure that might be required for, or a small percentage of it. I do want to make sure that our audiences don't go, oh, yes, I should take a very, very big breath and push the sound. That's not what we're
And
getting
bear
at.
down. Yeah.
But, yes, exactly.
Please don't do that.
But a certain percentage of that sensation, there is increased subglottal pressure to help create sounds like that, I would say, whether brassy or spinto.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
cool. I love
Yeah.
it.
And
Yeah.
hardened musculature. So that's with brassy, I think of that. So the musculature of the tract is going to be in a stiffer state to
Hmm.
reflect tone differently.
Ooh, yeah.
So I think about the muscles of the throat and the tract in general. The state they're in absorbs and reflects sound differently.
Ooh, yeah, that's really interesting.
So if we're
So
gonna,
good.
and it's possible that it's really hard to be pushed and brassy here without being pushed and brassy here. That's probably fairly challenging.
Everything is very interconnected with how teeny tiny the muscles are and how they all connect at very similar points down the vocal tract, for sure.
Mhm. Mhm.
I love it.
Another thing
Okay.
about brassy versus warm to think about is use of the voice in choral situations.
Yeah, you work with a lot of choirs, right?
I
Or
do.
you
I
work
work
with,
with a
yeah.
I do. I go in as a voice person, and I try and share with them ways to survive their favorite activity better.
Oh, I love that. That's so good.
Because
So how does this come up there?
a lot of them do just survive, and they go home like, oh, that was a hard rehearsal, and I'm
Oh,
thinking to myself, wait a minute, do they not realize how the skills that they could be improving on? If that wasn't the case, I couldn't sing, a loud opera a whole night of it without being tired and in pain at the end, and that would be anathema to my training to work that way.
it's so true. It's so
And
true.
so I feel like my one of my callings is to sort of open their eyes and let them understand that it's not just um, a survival endeavor. It's something that they can thrive and be skilled at and maybe enjoy it even more. So if you
Yes.
have that brassy sound, you're not going to blend in choir.
So fair.
And then they start tamping down their voice in a way that doesn't make sense to them, and maybe they get tension. But that warm, breathy tone is always going to blend pretty well
Yeah, absolutely.
for
It's
most
so true.
voices.
Oh, so good. So definitely not engaging in the brassy qualities in choir.
Yeah, that's not going to be your friend. They're going to be like, you should be in the alto section if that's what you're looking for. If you're a soprano, you're going to be put down lower so that you're not using that more pingy
Mm,
part of your voice.
or come join us in musical theater where we love all the brassy sounds.
There you go. All right. So there's one on here that I'm not having an answer for. Speech like.
Ah, this is probably one of the most consistent words I use in my studio. So, speech like is just what it sounds like, as much like your speaking voice as possible. They can refer, your teacher could be referring to this both in regards to the vocal fold level, because most of us talk in what we might refer to as a chest dominant registration or chest voice, or where the vocal folds are thicker than they are when we're in what you might commonly hear referred to as head voice. So they could be talking about registration for this speech like quality,
Mhm.
and they're likely talking about the way you form your vowels and consonants. Speech like is usually not going to have quite as much resonance to it because we're not living on the pure Italian vowels. We move through lots of, the pure Italian vowels. Do you want to talk to us about that for a sec and make sure
Oh,
that's clear
sure.
for everybody? Yeah. So, like,
Um,
what are some examples?
well, the five cardinal vowels are the favorite ones: E, A, O, U. And if we say those in an English accent, American English accent in particular, it's E, A, O, U. And there's a
Mhm.
lot of diphthongs in there, which we try very carefully to avoid when we're singing in the European languages to varying degrees, depending on the language. In Italian, never.
Yeah,
Never,
absolutely.
never any diphthongs. It's always a pure tone. Even though you might say to me, but hey, my grandmother grew up in this small town and they sound this way. Yes, but we're talking about the high art of the country, and this is the standard for how
So
it's
true.
done. So
Yeah,
that's what I mean.
yeah, that's exactly it. So the diphthongs, just in case anyone is unfamiliar with that term, a diphthong refers to a vowel that's in a single consonant but has multiple sounds to it. So a as opposed to right? Is that is going to be
In a single syllable is what you meant, I think.
what did I say? Did I say
Consonant.
something?
Yeah.
Ha, single syllable.
Yeah, so in
Good work,
one
Maddie.
syllable, you have two vowel sounds.
Yes,
Which
exactly.
Italian will do on purpose. Buona. That's two
Mm,
syllables, buo and na. But it's on
sure.
purpose. And if you did that with there not, and it's being spelled with two vowels.
Mm,
But in
yes.
English, we might have those two vowels happen with one vowel spelling, which is
Yes.
a fault in the Italian. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I'm looking for speech like, I'm actually asking for you to move through all the diphthongs. So you get to say like instead of like, right?
Right.
Like. We get to move through all of those diphthongs.
Yeah.
One
That
sounds a
can
lot more like the way I speak, right?
Yeah, and that can feel so good because of that.
I love it. I love letting those vowels live like that. It's so good.
It feels so amazing to actually communicate with your audience in your vernacular. To me,
Yes.
that is very special.
Yes.
I love
totally
my
agree.
foreign language music, but I got pretty tired of not feeling like people were hearing me communicate meaning in tone and in how I was pronouncing things.
Mhm.
There's meaning in all of that.
Yes, so much. I'm secretly working on a classical piece right now for a submission that I have to do, and I feel that very much so. I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel like me. This is
Yeah.
hard. How am I going to feel authentic in this piece? But we'll find a way. I know we will. So it's definitely there. But yes, so maybe more chest dominant registration. Um, and feeling free to move through the vowels and consonants in the way that you naturally speak in your own vernacular. Oftentimes, some things that are cut are the rhoticity, the R's of the sound, right? That will often be cut in Western classical. Am I
Yep.
right? Western classical music, you're going to cut the sound.
Yep.
You're probably going to live on an maybe a little bit more. So things like that we welcome much in contemporary styles and musical theater. That's not as common in Western classical singing.
Yeah.
Love it.
I'll throw out there that it's people are tired of that, and on the newer compositions, this happened in France too. Back at the time of Bizet, people, am I right on that?
That sounds
Or
rightish to
Berlioz.
me.
Or Berlioz. I can't remember which composer suddenly said, "You know what? I don't want to hear that high class diction. I want to hear something more street
Yeah.
comfortable." And we
Yes.
started losing that silent schwa that's always added into the singing. They started skipping through that in the speech, in the singing. So that's fun. I think a lot of cultures go through those different trends.
Definitely. I love it.
Okay, so
Cool.
speech like feels more relaxed, or does it take just as much work?
I think it depends on your habits and your training. For me, it feels far more relaxed. But I spend a lot of time in the musical theater genre where we're looking for speech like. So I'm set up to create that sound more right off the bat with
It's
more
your
habitually, I
default,
would say. My
right?
default, that's a great way to word it.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't think it's inherently easy for, say, a classical singer. I work with a number of singers who are trying to transition themselves from a classical world over to something a little more contemporary. And it's not easy or mentally relaxed for them, I might say.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's the mental effort level that really comes into play there. What do you think?
Yeah, I was actually asking the question more about projection, but I suppose that also depends on the type of
Oh,
piece.
so yeah, your volume level. That's a really great way to look at it. In regards to projection, I agree. It's going to be more at the volume level you would speak at, as opposed to call at or project at.
Mhm.
Uh, I can have a casual conversation with someone who's 5 feet away from me and call that speech like, and I can have a conversation with a group of 5 people in my living room and probably still get away with calling that speech like. But once I'm projecting a good 25, 30 feet, I might not call that quite as speech-like in regards to the breath pressure and the volume that we're
Yeah,
engaging in. Yeah,
right.
for
Okay.
sure. That's a great observation that I hadn't thought of.
All right. Head voice and chest voice.
Woo! Let's do it. Okay, so head voice and chest voice have been adopted by the industry as very standard terms that feel like they are as foundational as you get, but in reality, they are imagery terms too. So, head voice refers to vocal folds. We like to refer to we like the analogy of how many fingers are closing together.
Good.
So your vocal folds vibrate
Yep.
to create sound. At A440, they're vibrating 440 times a second like this. When you get the full closure of the fold, the four-finger closure, we might say, you might refer to that as something a little bit more chest voice. When you're in head voice, or what most of the industry is going to refer to as head voice, You're vibrating just on the edges. The full
Yeah.
contact of the folds don't come together, and the vocal folds are stretched a little longer and thinner for higher pitches. Sounds a little more hooty, owl-like, maybe like a whoo, 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 as opposed to, I'm going to try some chest dominance up there. Woo, woo, woo kinds of quality, right? There's going to be more airflow in the sound, so the vocal folds might not be as firmly closed together as well. Even on the edge there, you can have varying degrees of how much they are closed together or adducted together.
Right.
And it's usually reserved for pitches above middle C or above that E above middle C. You can train it to a certain lowness of pitch, but the thickness of the vocal folds start to come into play for most voices under middle C. So that's what we're going to mean functionally by head voice. I always get curious as to why it might have been described that way originally by some of the original singers, right?
Yeah, to me that's not
the original singers. I shouldn't. There's no such thing as an original singer, but I think we get what I'm getting at.
Yeah, to me that's not mysterious because a lot of us feel that resonance when we use the folds that way up here in our head.
Many people do, for sure. I'm not sure I do, though. I might not be one of those people.
Okay.
I don't feel the vibrations relocalized. I will feel a release of subglottal pressure, so I'm feeling a lack of things down here.
Yeah.
But it's more just a lack of as opposed to anything that's actually happening up here.
Got
It's
it.
so interesting. Yeah, so interesting. But
yeah, so people
can
come
understand.
into their voice lessons and they say, well, why is it called the head voice? And I think somewhere in their minds they must think that our singing is somehow located there. Of course, it isn't. It's a biofeedback of what we're doing in our throat, and same with chest, of course. Chest meaning that we're feeling that biofeedback of the way these are engaged here in our body rather than higher up.
Yeah, so true. Oh, I love it. Yes. So chest voice, what we mean by chest voice, I kind of talked about it a second ago, but when you're talking about the amount of closure the vocal folds are engaged in, you're getting more of that 4-finger closure. The full vocal folds are coming together. It creates a buzzier, maybe girthier would be a word that you use, quality of sound that we usually reserve for mid to low pitches. So you're going to be speaking in this register most of the time, or this kind of quality most of the time. If you call out and say, hey, you're going to find a pretty sturdy, engaged kind of chest voice for yourself. Again, similar kinds of similar things to what Laura said. You're getting some feedback potentially from down here, and I think it's because of that subglottal pressure. Things are a little more closed off here, so you feel that breath pressure localized here because it's stopped a little bit more at the vocal folds. Not totally stopped, of course, but definitely not quite as flowy as you're going to run into in head voice. I adopt these terms. I use them in my studio all the time. I don't necessarily say cricothyroid dominant, which is the muscle that stretches the vocal folds to make them long and thin, or thyroarytenoid dominant, which is the muscle that contracts the vocal folds like 2 biceps to make them thicker and fuller and stuff like that. They're easy terms to use that most of us have adopted, but I think it's good to unpack it and go, okay, what's happening functionally? What's happening at the vocal fold level to give us these different qualities of sound, for sure.
Absolutely. So, I think, to me, using those terms, once I've given the student the basis for them, I can move on from feeling that attachment to the anatomy. I just know that I've set their brain up to think like, okay, the voice is not located in my nose when I sing. Right? I mean, obviously they probably didn't think that, but that's the simplification of how confused some of our body mapping can be. And this is basically the reason we like having this kind of conversation is because we value that idea that if you send the wrong signal subconsciously inside you, you will confound the system just ever so slightly even. But if you're doing something under high stress with big pressures and you confound it slightly, you're going to notice that. And it's not going to be as fun and it's not going to be as good.
Oh, I totally agree. I love that body mapping is some of my favorite stuff to do with students in the studio. That concept that we all have a map in our body of our bodies about how it's organized in regards to size and location and function. And most of the time the map is pretty wrong originally, just because of, who knows, maybe inaccurate anatomy pictures we saw when we were younger. Not even inaccurate, but maybe not as specific as it could be. If you were to ask yourself, where is my elbow? You probably know. But like when you get teeny tiny with it, like, what is my elbow? Exactly how does that joint work? You start to realize, I'm not sure I know. And
Yeah.
then increasing the accuracy of that map is going to increase the functionality about how we are physiologically designed to function. So
Right.
it's so good. I love the body mapping.
Yeah.
So good.
That concept of biofeedback, I really enjoy that one.
Tell me
Because
more.
because like you picked up on earlier when I said I want someone to own their own product and their own activity. If I'm not zeroing in on what I'm feeling and taking the time to notice, then I can't learn from that and reapply it.
Yes, it's so
So
true. It's so true. I love that. I didn't realize Mike's given me crap about the original singers. That's good. You're right, Mike, the original singers. Oh man.
yes, Aries 87. We are live right now. That's why we're so fumbling. You came in. If you'd come in earlier, you would have seen that we lost our technological know-how for a few minutes, but we're trying. So yeah, if you have any questions, Aries, let us know. Going back to our questions. All right, here's a good one. What is mix? We've done head and chest. So now what's mix? I'll tell you how I like to talk about it. You can tell me what you think.
I would love that. Yes.
So one of the analogies I use, because I can't get away from imagery either, is that I'm going to call pure chest and pure head the black and white in my painter pots. And mix is going to be the varying mixing of those, of all the different shades of gray that I could possibly ever imagine as I'm trying to communicate the meaning of a esoteric poem to somebody. Those colors of gray definitely become important. They're not going to be things that I could have said in my own words, but if I can just use my voice in very flexible ways, I will impart some meaning. And I'll do that with tone, which is created by mixing the chest and head in various ways. That's one of the ways I like to talk about it.
Oh, that's a really great analogy. That's so good. I've used percentages a lot of the times, but the shades of gray makes so much sense. I love it as the analogy. It's so good.
So what is the functional way of talking about that?
Oh my gosh, the functional way. So you have 4 major muscle groups in your larynx that control the shape of the vocal folds and what position they are in. So you have muscles that bring them together, pull them apart, stretch them long and thin for higher sounds, and contract them to make them thicker and fuller for lower, girthier sounds, potentially. I like to actually, I wish I could, I probably could, but I'm not prepared to share my screen on this one. I like to use an XY graph to talk about it. So if X and Y are pressy or breathy, and sorry, if up and down is pressy and breathy, if you're X, I don't even know, X or Y. Your up and down is pressy to breathy.
Yeah.
And then you have you also have your
long and
thin,
short.
your thin to thick vocal folds. You can realistically plot yourself anywhere on that graph with any combination of the vocal fold setup. So learning how to coordinate all of that can be a challenging task that I'm sure we have a number of different lives on how to start to coordinate and build your mix. But that's the anatomy and the science of how it works. What's funny is the graph doesn't even take into consideration the breath pressure that might be happening underneath, and then the vocal tract shaping that's happening on top of it. The voice is not a one-way system. Vowels that happen up here absolutely have an effect as to what happens at the vocal fold level. So it's a combination of breath and vocal folds and your vowels. And this is why we take voice lessons, because there's so many different parts to figure out how to do it. But most of the time, mix is foundationally at the vocal fold level. What's happening there is what we're watching, and things that we do here and do above the vocal folds are also going to have an effect on the quality of that mix. So yeah, that's what we got going on there.
Excellent. All right, one more. Let's look at twang.
Let's do it.
I want to know, how do you teach twang?
How do you teach twang? Twang has some misconceptions. A lot of people associate twang either with nasality or with a country accent. One of those two things. Twang it can be combined with those two things. You can be twangy and nasal, and you can be twangy with a southern accent. But the twang is technically created in a portion of your vocal tract called your aryepiglottic sphincter, or created by your aryepiglottic folds. So the epiglottis, it's right behind your tongue. It's the portion of your vocal tract that closes off and protects the vocal folds every time you swallow. It protects your vocal folds and your lungs from getting food lodged in there every single time you swallow. It is right above the vocal folds. And as that epiglottis, if you can get your epiglottis to narrow slightly and come down just a little bit, it all of a sudden creates this nice little resonance chamber right on top of the vocal folds. And it boosts the sound. Helps us to have a greater perceived level of volume to the human ear for less effort on the vocal folds. So you hear the sound a lot, yes, in country music, absolutely. You hear the sound in a lot of musical theater. You hear the sound in a lot of gospel. It's used all over the place to help increase the perceived level of volume. It is a very bright sound. Because if we were to circle back to that imagery of bright, remember narrow in the back, it's a narrowing of the back of the vocal tract in some capacity.
But lower down.
But lower down, absolutely, lower down. If you think about the brass instrument, though, it's right near where the mouthpiece would be, or where the vibrator would be, right? So much like a brass instrument. So twang and brassy, absolutely. I think they can go together, you bet. I'm sure our audiences are about to ask, how do you find your twang? A good baby cry is what I always like to use. So instead of wah, you're going to probably hear something more along the lines of wah with that engaged. It's pretty aggressive, but if used appropriately and without adding the excess tensions that sometimes get involved, it can be a really effective tool to help boost the volume of your belt without having too much additional effort added on top of it.
And that's good.
That's the twang.
We want efficiency. That's what we always want.
Yeah. The thing you're going to run into with twang, though, is not every voice is designed to use twang efficiently. My voice doesn't like to use twang, or twang doesn't sit nicely on me, because the narrowing of that portion of the vocal tract triggers a chain reaction of narrowing throughout other portions of the vocal tract. So my constrictor muscles like to join the party a little bit. And those are just little aspects that you want to watch out for. Like Laura said earlier, it's hard to isolate these muscles from one another. They're all a part of the sword.
That's the zen. The zen of singing is what that is about right there.
Yes, so true. So true. That what's interesting is when you engage in twang, you'll probably hear what you think is nasality, or some singers might feel those vibrations localized up here as soon as you start engaging in some twang. But it's actually happening and created right down in here. So definitely interesting. Increasing the accuracy of your body map day by day. This is good.
That's right. That's what we're about. Well, this has been super fun. Thank you, Maddie.
Yay! We made it. We did it. Good. We made it, Laura. Are there any last minute things that we need to cover with anybody? Anything from voicelessons.com that we're supposed to share?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we are here ready to help people learn to sing. So if you want to try that out, then let us know at maybe sales@voicelessons.com would be a good email to send to, or Laura@voicelessons.com. I'll see you on the other side of either of those.
Yay. Well, thank you for having me, Laura. This was lots of fun.
Thank you for doing it. Have a great evening, everybody. And happy Thanksgiving. And we won't be here next week. We'll be eating turkey with our families. Yeah, I'm excited.
Yes, me too. Me too. Oh, have a good week, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, Laura.